Ще раз доброго дня.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our press conference that we dedicated to the anniversary of bloody events at Maidan. Our organization was monitoring the events of Maidan from the very first day. And in December 2013, we published our first report concerning the violations of human rights during the protests. When the protests ended in February last year, our priority became the investigation of the violations that we documented during the Maidan. This was unproportional and excessive use of force against the processes, cruel behavior, cruel treatment, and the use of firearms despite whether the protesters were peaceful or violent. The preliminary report, which resembles to a great extent the one that we will present today, was also about the behavior of the authorities in investigating these events. Even last summer, we said that there are delays in investigation and forensics. We said that there is a disruption of connection between lawyers and victims. And today we present a report where we document the systemic inability of the authorities to investigate and punish the guilty, and secondly, their inability to provide for the relatives of those who either died or suffered as a result of cruel treatment. And the speakers today are Krassimir Yankov, Amnesty International, Ukraine's researcher, and Tetiana Mazur, director of Amnesty International in Ukraine. There's also Vyacheslav Tsilitsky, who is present and who is one of the victims. You can talk to them. For those who want to interview our people in English, there's Levana Stianis, to whom you can talk about today's topic and about the whole gamut of things. Krassimir Yankov. Hello, everybody. I'll tell you about the methodology of research and about the cases that we investigated during our research and about the major problems that we found during our work. As you know, more than a year has passed since the bloody events in Maidan, but regrettably, those who suffered and their relatives have not found justice yet. And as of today, only 2 people were brought to responsibility who were sentenced according to along the lines of Mikhailo Gavrilyuk, who was a Cossack who was stripped naked and the frost. And after the court hearing, only 2 people got conditional delayed sentences who were recognized, but they were just the perpetrators, and those who issued orders and the commanders who were then and who abetted in the crime were not brought to responsibility, and they were not even identified. While we worked, we investigated 11 cases of people who suffered during the first dispersal of Maidan next to the Independence Monument, also with those who suffered as a result of clashes in Bankova Street on the 1st of December, and also with some people who suffered as a result of Hrushevsko clashes. All those people do not know how their cases are being investigated, and when they write to the prosecutor's office, they don't get any reply. The first case that we looked into was the case of Igor Sirenko, who was near the Independence Monument on the 30th of November. He was beaten by Berkut servicemen during while he was singing the anthem of Ukraine. He got a lot of hematomes, and he was questioned after this, and he was summoned to other interrogations, but he didn't go there because in the first days after the event, people were afraid that those interrogations would be used against them, and they will be branded perpetrators of crimes. Igor Sirenko paid for the forensic test himself, and he passed over these results to the prosecutor's office. However, a year after this was done, he still doesn't know the results of the investigation because he wasn't told what's happening in his case. In February 2014, he filed a case in the European Court on Human Rights, but there is no development there as well. On Bankova Street, on the 1st of December 2013, 9 people were detained by the police and Berkut Special Force. We talked to 8 of them. Some of them have seriously suffered as a result of what has happened. At least 2 of them have handed over to the prosecutor's office a video which documented that they were beaten. However, none of them got an answer from the prosecutor's office, and they were not told what was going on in investigating their case. Our information is based on interviews with them and their lawyers. Out of those 8 people whom we talked to, only 4 were recognized victims, and only with those 4 there were some investigative action like interrogation or identification of people who were beaten them. This happened in May to October 2014. You can find the exhaustive information about this on those people, including their names and what has happened today. Then, Grushevskoye Street, we talked to Vladislav Tsilitsky. Oh, yes, he is there. You can see him in the audience. You can talk to him later and ask him the questions. He was one of those who were on top of the colonnade of Dynamo Stadium on the 20th of December. He was ordered by police officers to lie down on the ground, and he was beaten and dragged to police vehicles that were in another place. And you can see a video of this on the internet. He told us that he fainted, and while he was dragged there, he was severely beaten, and he went to investigative bodies, but when we talked to him, he still hasn't got any reply, and I think that, yes, he confirms that even today, in spite of the accessibility of all the data and the video, there are no actions in response from the prosecutor's office. I will tell you about some major problems that we have, and I pinpointed during our investigation. This investigation is being conducted by 3 structures: the General Prosecutor's Office, the Ministry of Interior, and the Security Service. As you know, the authorities promised several times that everything will be investigated. However, all the efforts that were... Oh, yes, thank you. However, all the efforts point to the fact that there's no coordination, and the jurisdiction of these various structures often overlaps and conflicts with each other. This is why they are not efficient in this investigation. In December 2014, the Department for Special Investigation at the Prosecutor General's office was created, which we think was positive.
That was quite positive step forward for coordination between all these structures, and there are 50 investigators, including the representatives of the Ministry of Interior and the Security Service. They work in two teams. One is working on the cases related to Maidan, and another one the cases against the former representatives of the authorities. And there is also the structure that coordinates all this information that comes from investigators. It's too early to say whether this Department of Special Investigations will be able to coordinate the work of three bodies: Prosecutor General Office, Security Service, and the Ministry of Interior, but the representatives of the investigation and some other people mention some problems, issues, which in general can hamper the investigation, because, as you know, in the past, in the Ministry of Interior and the Security Service, they were not very well cooperating between each other. The system of judicial system has also suffered. There's no investigators with the needed experience and skills. And we understand that Ukraine has never seen in its history so many crimes and such big volumes of evidence. And one of the major problems is that all the law enforcement agencies are to coordinate their work with the Pechersk court in Kiev, because they are within its jurisdiction, but the courts do not have sufficient resources to process all the requests they receive from different investigatory bodies, and that leads to delays in their work. And also we have found out that there's no adequate forensic expertise, because there's no equipment and no specialists who can conduct analysis of photo and video evidence. In the beginning, after the end of Euromaidan on the 20th of February, many material evidence, many pieces of material evidence were lost. They were burnt or destroyed on purpose, but also the investigation was not started immediately after the events. The workers of the investigatory bodies say that about 90% of the evidence, like the maps, the documents on planning the operations of law enforcement people, that was immediately eliminated after the events in Maidan. But even despite the fact that they don't have any evidence, all that information could be received if the witnesses were interrogated. But the investigators have not been doing anything. They were not interviewing anyone. They were not interrogating anyone. Another obstacle is the lack of desire on behalf of the law enforcement to cooperate with the investigators. The personnel of Berkut left to Russia or Crimea, and that has been recognized by the authorities. But Berkut was just a small part of all those law enforcement bodies that were present in Maidan. And also the investigators saw the opposition from inside the system, because very often the people in law enforcement bodies, they refuse to cooperate with investigators, and sometimes these people, either they do not react to collab papers, or if they manage to take a person to interrogation, then very often what they say is that we do not remember, or I do not, I have not seen anything, or I wasn't there. And one more problem that we have identified: when the prosecutor's office wants to take someone from law enforcement bodies to interrogation, very often they find out that this person is either on vacation or he's sent to the east of Ukraine to combat the pro-Russian separatists. Even though the criminal code of Ukraine provides for the opportunity to conduct interrogation using video, like Skype, but that is not taking place either. Well, I believe you will have questions and we'll answer them after the press conference. Now I will give the floor to our director, Tetiana Mazur, who will tell about our recommendations that we would like to send to investigatory bodies. Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to start my part from a reminder. I would like to remind you the events of last winter. That's the 30th of November, 2013. 1st of December 2013. January 2014. That video was made by our organization before the tragic events of February 2014, when the peaceful participants of the protest were shot dead. We did not know then that this other thing will be happening, but now we have seen, and we reminded you on how the previous authorities were violating the rights of the participants of the protesters, but the new authorities non-efficiently, improperly investigate the violation of such rights, making all those who were guilty responsible, those who were giving orders and those who were applying the force against the participants of the protest should have been the priority task for those who came to power in the result of the victory of a revolution of dignity. But today, a year after the protests in Euromaidan stopped, the justice for the victims is something not achievable. Amnesty International today presents the report where we documented and we follow the course of investigation of just a few cases, but they do not differ from hundreds of others. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people suffered from law enforcement bodies during Euromaidan. These people hoped that after Euromaidan finished, they will see justice. But now the victims do not know whether those who are responsible for these crimes committed during Euromaidan will be identified and made responsible. This situation continues their moral suffering and does not allow them to get compensation, and that contradicts international standards. Also, that deprives them and all the Ukrainian society of the opportunity to learn the truth about the violence during the protests. But the main thing is that the mistakes and drawbacks of the investigation which took place after Euromaidan finished again revealed the problems in the system. The system cannot ensure very efficient investigation. The opposition from the system itself, the conflict of interest between these bodies, the lack of resources, qualification, existing competition of powers between minimum 3 agencies, all that demonstrate the structural problems which have existed for many years and which create ground for not being punished. The Amnesty International has documented all the violations and also put together recommendations.
And also some recommendations were worded. We call upon the Ukrainian authorities to obey the international obligations and organize and provide for the objective and independent investigation of every case of use of force during the events on Maidan, to provide lawyers and the victims with sufficient and timely information on the results of investigation, and also to provide for the openness for the Ukrainian public so that they are sure of the objectivity of the use of law, to provide all those who suffered from the illegal use of force from the law enforcement borders, a compensation from the state, including the adequate medical help, also to reveal the truth about what has happened, and to guarantee that similar cases won't ever happen again. And in order to avoid similar tragic events, we should urgently and sufficiently reform the system of law enforcement bodies. The Amnesty International thinks that everything should be made in legal and political sphere to create an efficient mechanism of investigation of violations of law by the law enforcers, and this mechanism should reflect efficiency. Enough resources will provide for the participation of those who suffered in the investigation and also for the public control. We're not talking about abstract things here. We're talking about specific things because the Ukrainian authorities now have an opportunity to create such a mechanism, and there is a norm in the Criminal and Processual Code about the creation of the State Bureau of an Investigation, which the Ukrainian authorities should begin to realize. The creation of such a bureau will make police and law enforcers in general to report to the society and will help to restore trust in them. We also call upon the authorities to provide for the coordination of efforts between different departments that are engaged in investigating the events on Maidan, and to provide for the human resources and material resources that are needed, and the obligation, the duty to conduct such investigation is not a duty of one single body. This is a joint responsibility of the entire authority of Ukrainian authorities. So we expect that different bodies of power will cooperate and ensure the achievement of certain results, and all the guilty should be brought to responsibility. Also, Amnesty International addresses the international partners of Ukraine and calls upon them to provide the necessary help to the investigative bodies of Ukraine so that the efficient investigation take place, and also to raise the question, the issue of the objective, avid, and efficient investigation during all bilateral and multilateral meetings that they have with the Ukrainian authorities. We are talking about the violation of human rights during Euromaidan here. This is all. Maybe you'll have questions. Any questions? Well, if there are no questions, then thank you very much. Thank you very much.